Over the span of a long career, a photographer can be known for a particular subject, style, or story. It's the kind of association that when you see or hear about it, you immediately connect it with a particular name. Harvey Stein is a New York-based photographer who is known for his black and white street photography of New York City, especially the areas of Harlem and Coney Island. With an ultra-wide-angle lens on his Leica, he has created a personal vision of one of the most photographed cities in the world. But it's when a photographer takes on a different subject, using a different medium, that you come to understand the inherent talent of that person. Such is evidenced in Harvey's latest book, Then and There. Then and There is a collection of portraits made in the city of New Orleans during Mardi Gras in 1979. Using a Polaroid SX70, Harvey produced portraits that are both timeless while being a reflection of the times in which they were created. This is Ibarionex, and welcome back to the Candid Frame. But it's great to see you again and to talk to you about the book.
Yes. So you have some questions, or do I?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You have the book, you looked at it.
Oh, yeah, it's right here.
Great.
Yeah, I've really enjoed going through it. And it's a kind of a departure from what I'm used to seeing when I look at your work.
Well, absolutely. We could talk about that, I guess.
Yeah, because these images were made back in the late 70s.
1979. It's part of the title. Originally, I thought it was 1981 or 82, and I had to research it. So I went to the Mardi Gras for a couple of years, and at that time, mid-70s to the late 70s, early 80s, I had several Polaroid SX70 cameras.
Yes.
They were very popular. Well, they came out, I think, in 72, 73. And then Lucas Samaras, who I'm a big fan of anyway, his art, started shooting with a Polaroid SX70, and he began to he found a way to manipulate the prints that came out after about a minute. He would take a stylus or a pen that didn't write anymore and move the emulsion around. The emulsion at that time was very soft, and for about 24 hours after the photograph was taken, you could pretty easily squish around the emulsion and change the look of the photograph. And he was an artist and a kind of and very creative and a master at it. So he was very influential in publicizing the camera and having serious photographers regard it as maybe something they should look at. So I bought one, and I played around with the emulsion many times, and I guess I decided to take it down to the Mardi Gras with me. My major reason for going was to photograph the Mardi Gras with my Leicas. I had two M4s at the time, and I still do. When twilight came, I was shooting at 100 ISO. It was getting dark. And I took out the Polaroid, put the Leicas away, and started shooting with a flash bar on the top of the camera. It took a flash bar with five flash cubes on it and started shooting 5 or 10, maybe you could reverse it, and started shooting at twilight. Always interested in photographing people. And so I was fascinated by the faces that these people would put on themselves, whether by painting them or using masks or a combination. And everyone was very approachable. And I started in the evenings using the Polaroid with the flash. And I shot probably 60, 70, 80 photographs. It wasn't my main thing. And I came home and looked at them and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I didn't do anything with them, put them in a box, a Polaroid box that the film came in, and put them aside. I knew I had them, and I kind of knew where they were. And I met Andrew Fadnick. Do you know Andrew? Have you ever met him?
No, I've not met him.
Okay, so This is shouldn't be a long story. I met him at APAD at, I think it was the Pier in New York. It was a not Photo Fest. it was
Photoville?
No, it happens every April. This year, it's photo, I'll get it for you. It was Paris Photo New York. So I met him at this big photography event and gathering where they have a lot of merchandise and selling equipment and doing presentations to sell product. And they have for the last few years at the pier. It's at the pier on the Hudson River, and they have a small section of book publishers there. As a sort of a small wing of this event. And there's tables and book presentations. So a lot of the publishers are there selling their books. And I came to a table where I'm looking at a lot of tables and looking at books, and I'm buying a few books. And so I stopped at Zatara Press's table. This is Andrew Fadnik, FedYnak. And still, I'm not, to this day, I don't know how to pronounce it quite right. So he's sitting there, and I introduced myself. He knew me. He knew of me. He went to ICP, where I teach, through the graduate program. I'd never met him there or knew him, but we talked. And he asked me, do you have anything salted away that would be surprising for people to know that you did it, given that I'm pretty well known as a street photographer and a black and white photographer. And at that point, I had done 7 books. And I guess my Mexico book came out that fall. So that was the 8th book. And I said, yeah, I do. I have a lot of Polaroids that I've never shown, color, SX70. And in particular, I have a series of faces, close up, shot at twilight with a flash. I've never shown it, and it's put away, and I guess I could find it. So Andrew said, yeah, I'd like to see it. He's located in Richmond, Virginia. Maybe a month or two later, this is April 2018. So maybe in May or June, he came up to my apartment, my so-called studio, really my office. And I showed him the work. We spent a couple hours discussing it, and he said, I'd like to publish it. So to me, I didn't see it as a book. I didn't regard it necessarily as a book. Zatara Press is a small press. They do limited editions. He's been in business since 2014, and he's done this I think is his 13th book, Lucky 13. And I wasn't aware of him. And I wasn't aware really of the small press publishing market. So I educated myself a little. I liked him, and we signed a contract. And a year and a half later, we had the book ready to show at the same event 2 years later, 2020, on April 1st. But of course, it was canceled. I had a talk lined up and a book signing lined up. It was canceled. Yeah. So we said, this is not a good time to put out the book. Let's wait till the fall. The book was already printed in Spain and sent to Andrew. So he had all of these books in his storage area in Richmond. They're sitting there, and we said, well, let's try to introduce it October 1st. And that's what we did.
It's a fascinating book because Mardi Gras is an often photographed event. Yes. For obvious reasons. It's so colorful and different,
yes.
The characters and people acting out. But these photographs really provide a very different take. And it's not just that they're portraits and then they're made on Polaroids, but they have the context of being a different time and yet still being quite ageless at the same time.
I agree. I did photograph it with my Leicas black and white film, kind of like everyone else has, I suppose.
Mhm.
I hope to say a little bit differently because of my vision and my style, but these are wildly different from what I've done and what from anyone else has done with Mardi Gras. And I say it could have been done last week, or this, it could have
Yeah.
been in 2020 Mardi Gras, which, by the way, was held. If you might recall, it happened in March, just before the big shutdown. I think it happened
Mhm.
the second week, first or second week, and it was a big hotspot for the virus to spread, and we didn't know so much about it then. So I agree. I really, one reason I love it or like it a lot is that it could have been done. It could have been done anywhere at any big. It could have been done Halloween, I suppose, in a
Yeah.
southern city. It could have been done this year or 2 years ago or 1979. You know, I love masks. I've always been intrigued by masks. And then the other irony, I suppose, is we're living with masks since March, or most of us are the smart people
Mhm.
that want to
Oh, that's very true. Yeah.
survive this. So, and I'm working now in my neighborhood on the Upper West Side, photographing people dealing with the virus 2020 for the last 7 months. I want to photograph the people in masks. I mean, this is intriguing to me, the mystery of masks, the translation of who you might be, a change of your identity, face painting, masks. You
Mhm.
become another soul. You become another person. So that always, and I always liked that. I went to Mexico for many years photographing. And one reason why I love the Mexico culture is their fascination and use of masks in their rituals and in their history. I guess this the Mayans and Zotecs all use masks in their rituals. So it's a continuing fascination. The fact that it's Mardi Gras is probably maybe only important because it was where it happened and allowed me to access this kind of subject matter.
I took away from it, which I don't think I'd ever really considered, was largely inspired by the fact that they were portraits.
Okay.
And as I looked at each face, I started thinking about how each of these people decided to interpret themselves for this
Right.
event. And you're trying to imagine who they were in the real world, because some of them could have been buskers or
Oh,
attorneys or policemen, or,
absolutely.
they could be anybody. But when they
Right.
put on this face paint or they put on these masks, they become someone else. And it was really interesting by just taking in the face and the direct eye contact that they had with you as the photographer. It really brought up the question of why this look? Why did they feel that this is the way that they wanted to express themselves? And of
Right.
course, it's a question that can't be answered, but it is definitely a question that came up for me, that when people decide to, put on these masks in whatever form that they do, that part of it is sort of an interesting extension of themselves that they normally wouldn't reveal, and yet they do in ironically they do ironically by not disguising themselves but actually revealing themselves in a kind of interesting
Yeah,
way.
I think they want, did you read the essay, perchance?
Yeah, it's a great essay. Yeah.
I had to tone it down. She's so academic. I mean, she used words I didn't understand often, but I thought it was very beautifully written, and she's a great writer and a scholar. Actually, I didn't want it to be so academic that people would get lost or couldn't read it. And I think she talks about the transformation that we undergo when we're wearing masks. We could become anybody. We can get out of our humdrum life into being a superhero or just anyone who we always wanted to be. But beyond that, these are homemade masks. I think most of the
Yeah.
images in the book are face painted masks that are created by the individual. I don't know that they put on the paint themselves. Maybe
Mhm.
they did in a mirror, using a mirror, or they guided someone to as to how to do it, apply the paint or the makeup. Everyone is so original and beautiful. And I guess if I had time, or if I knew that this would be a book someday, I could have tried to interview the people for their motivations and really ask them who they are or what they do, ask them some biographical information. I'm doing that now with my Instagram posts. I'm photographing people on the street with the cell phone camera, my iPhone.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you are aware of my posts. And I'm writing stories about each person, and I'm staying with them for 5 or 10 minutes to try to get some information, and then writing stories. So I've always been intrigued by us, by people. I've always considered myself a people photographer, a person photographer, and I always want to get close. I'm using, with my film cameras, 80% of the time a 21 millimeter lens.
Yeah.
And I'm getting close. Now that's a particular difficulty now with the virus. I kind of violate that a little bit, but I am trying to stay a little bit further away. So for me, using the SX70 and focusing it close and getting close was really an extension of what I've always wanted to do. Even in 1979, I was doing it. I started photographing in 1970, 1971. Even that early in my career, 6, 7, 8 years into it, I'm drawn to people, and I guess I know what I want. It's straightforward, eye contact, one-on-one usually, and that's how I often shoot with film, and getting close and wide angle. I think the lens on the SX70 is a 40 millimeter or 38.
I think you're right. Mm-hmm.
As I recall, I'm dragging that up. And I'm always curious about people and who they are and what they do and why are they painting themselves this way? And did they do that last year and are they going to do it next year? Is this a constant disguise? Or, mask? And do they even consider it masks? Maybe it's a joy, it's just a celebration and a performance. Maybe some of these people are actors or would-be actors or want to actively display themselves. We're a society of performers, I think, many
most definitely
on the streets. And particularly now with the iPhone, with all the selfies that people are doing. I mean, Susan Sontag said it correctly in the 70s in her book on photography that one trouble that she saw with photography was that we go to the Eiffel Tower and photograph ourselves in front of it and don't regard the tower or consider what it really is or what it's about. Or we go to a tourist site, the Grand Canyon or wherever, and solely for a picture of ourselves in front of the place and saying we were there. And now the selfie indulges all of us in doing, or encourages all of us doing it, so because it's so damn easy to do.
When you approach people now and you're using your cell phone as opposed to the SX70 that you did back in the 70s and early 80s,
right?
Do you see that people are responding to you as a photographer differently as a result of what you just talked about in terms of this sort of selfie culture? Do you see a difference?
I'm never refused when I ask to photograph someone with a cell phone. I am refused when I ask them to be photographed with either my Leica or I have a 5D Mark II Canon camera, which is a big monster. Mm-hmm. People are used to cell phones. They have one. They photograph with it. They photograph themselves with it, I'm sure. And thinking about it, I've never, ever, maybe once or twice been refused, but I'm often refused with a regular camera. And as small as the Leica M4s or M6s are, I'm still refused with that also. So yeah, that is interesting. And the connection between the iPhone and the SX70, another connection that I see is that they're both instant. So with the Polaroid, it did take about a minute to process once it was the print was spit out of the camera. It's not 100% instant. And I would stand there with the person I photographed, and we'd look at it. And I would say, do you like it? Or can I do it again with a little difference? And as I recall, most people said yes. And I would be happy to photograph a second shot and give it to them. Mm-hmm. Although it did slow me down. To me, it was a slow camera, but it was immediate. I mean, you could see it. The same thing with the iPhone. You can shoot and show them on the iPhone. And I guess with the digital camera, you can also do that and show from the back of the camera. But the iPhone, my iPhone image is much larger than the image on the back of my 5D digital camera. So I can share it with them, and we could work to make even a better photograph if they're willing. I don't do that a lot, but that can happen, and I've done it somewhat.
Yeah, and it seems like that's, I was wondering about how the type of camera you use inevitably changes the way you photograph, you see a scene, and engage with your subject. Right. And by using either your cell phone or the SX70, it really provides for a level of engagement that you normally might not have when you're using the Leica on that wide-angle lens.
Right. I'm not real interested in sharing my work with people as I'm shooting. It slows me down. I want to move on. But sometimes the interaction is nice and fun. And it allows me, on the iPhone in particular, it allows me to say, I could send you a picture. Give me your email and I'll send you a picture. And I do it a lot. I never would do that with the Leica. I mean, I might be 2 years behind in developing the film. I wouldn't know who these people are anymore, or I'd take down their address. I'd have to mail them a print. Forget it. I'm not geared that way. But with the iPhone, I feel more generous because I'm speaking to them and maybe spending more time with them. Also with the SX70, and it might allow me to be a little more generous with sending them something.
As you said before, you largely known for your black and white work, but
right.
the Polaroids and the phone involve color. And tell me about using color as another visual element in your photographs.
Yeah, I really regard myself as a black and white photographer. I think black and white work is more personal. Colors could be more pictorial, or you get lost in the color. I see color, but I don't get fascinated by it. I'm not. I mean, yeah, sometimes I see color and I should take the picture because of the color. I think the color negates the subject matter or competes with the subject matter. I want my subject to be primary, and the black and white without the distraction of color, I think more readily allows that. Do I convert any of my color work, my digital color work, into black and white? I've done a little of that with the cell phone. It's real easy to do. I use Snapseed to alter to fix, quote unquote, the cell phone image a little bit. But I don't do that much. So yeah, if the color is important and adds to it rather than overwhelms the photograph, I will be attracted to that scene maybe. I'm not a scene, quote unquote, photographer as much as an individual person photographer, or maybe I'm not candid, although one of my books is just about all candid work, the Briefly Seen book from 2015, which is about Midtown and the crowds in Midtown. I'm always looking for individuals to photograph, sometimes successfully and sometimes not. Even as I did with the SX70, as I do with the iPhone, and definitely as I do with the Leicas and the Canon. I'm more into the person and the people and being close and interacting. I want them to acknowledge my presence as much as I'm acknowledging theirs. I want I want to feel maybe a connection, and I want to feel not anonymous, and I want to feel like I'm alive and I'm on the street and not just disregarded as an anonymous person. I mean, that's inevitable with most people. I'm not interested in a lengthy discussion particularly, but with the iPhone, maybe a little more than I have in the past.
Thank you so much to the many people who have reached out recently to demonstrate their support of the show. I know it's a difficult time for many, especially having to celebrate the holiday season in the midst of a pandemic. That's why it means so much to me that you've chosen to support the show through our Patreon effort. And if you've been thinking about it but just haven't gotten around to it, today would be a great day to start. Your contribution goes a long way in helping us to meet the cost of production and makes this show that much easier to create each week. You can do that by contributing $5, $10, $20 or more a month by visiting patreon.com/The Candid Frame. Just $5 a month will make a huge difference for us. Thank you as always for your support. Because people are constantly looking at themselves in cell phones, I've seen probably, in general, that people have tended to affect a pose or a look, a persona that they've learned to create as a result of photographing themselves all the time. And I'm usually averse to that because I don't feel like it's genuine.
I agree.
But when you try to photograph someone and they give you that particular face or that particular pose, what do you do so that you can get something more in the lines with what you would like to see?
Well, firstly, I don't want people to smile in my photographs if possible. So if they do, I let them. I take a photograph, and then I take a third photograph and maybe a fifth photograph. And often I will say, okay, we did one of you smiling or a couple of you smiling. Could you be serious? My way of working is to get them not to smile, have them not to smile, and look into the camera. So in most of the SX70s, they're looking into the camera, and I'm directing that. I want them to be serious. I want to make a serious photograph. I think a smile is phony for the camera, and they're trying to put their best face forward. I think we look better not smiling. We're less wrinkled. We're less phony. So the way I get through, to answer your question, I try to shoot through that and have them do more than one or two and have them give me a strong look into the camera, and I will direct that. If they're posing, if they're putting their fingers up, I'll say, okay, good, but now just be yourself, just relax. I don't even know if I say that. Just be yourself and look into the camera, and I'll do the rest. I was in China last year in 2019. Everyone smiled and put up their fingers. It was really hard. So in one way or another, I tried to direct them not to do it, but it was especially the young people there. They're so into their iPhones. It's an iPhone culture, and it's a Me Too culture. It's a very commercial culture. I don't know if you've been there, but it is fascinating. And they all want to look good, and they all pose. It's true.
Yeah. Wow.
So I try to just work through that, and sometimes I can't. I can't get them not to smile. I can't get them not to pose. So I kind of give up and move on.
Yeah. When you revisited the Polaroids after all this time, what new impressions did you have of the photographs that you likely didn't have when you first took them and then you put them away?
Boy, that's a hard question to answer. We did edit them down. I mean, maybe I had 60 that I had in the pile, and they're now in the book. There's 47 images. What I was struck with or by is how well they held up, for one. I mean, these Polaroids can fade very easily. These Polaroids are over 40 years old, and none of them have faded. The sky blue can go to magenta, and then it's a dye process, I believe, so that some of the colors do fade. I just luckily had them in a box in a drawer that was dark. I don't have a dehumidifier or anything like that. And how brilliant the colors are still and were in the initial shots. I mean, I remember shooting with the camera, and every third photograph would be ruined. The emulsion, it wouldn't take, or half the emulsion was off. You get 10 photographs in a package, and it was probably $10 or $12 then, so it wasn't inexpensive to do. But, you know, it was a cool process because it was the first instant photography that I worked with. I don't know, was there any other instant photography ways of?
No, I think that was the first. Yeah.
Heretofore, you did a roll of film, color, slide. I had to take it to a lab. And it was a very intimate way of photographing. You could do nudes, you could do yourself, you could, and not have a lab be the intermediary of it. I mean, it was very private. And then being a street photographer, I wanted to try to apply the camera to the street. It was bulky and hard to frame. The viewfinder, it was a little odd and a little unwieldy, and it's clunky, but I worked with it enough to manage to work, I think, well with it. But slow. You think, oh, this is fast. You get an instant photograph. No, you had to stop and wait for it to develop.
Did you try using it in the street like you did your Leica, just to see what you could create with the Polaroid as opposed to, using film?
Well, these are all street photographs.
No, I mean, other than portraits, in terms of just creating the kind of scenes that you were normally.
Well, it wasn't wide angle enough. No, I probably didn't. I'd have to look. I did more like friends, lady friends, maybe, some nudes. I did some landscape, I think. I'd have to. I'd have to maybe take it to the park where I didn't have to rush things and maybe take more time. I mean, I'm surely I took it to the street. I'd have to go back and look at what I've done. I remember doing close-up things like a shoe and a leg with an interesting stocking and shoe, a friend or something. I photographed some artists with it in their studios and with their canvases, friends who were artists. I remember that. Yeah. So I did explore with it. And then I tried to figure out what I could manipulate with the stylus and push the stuff around, the emulsion around. I never was as good as Samaras. No one ever has been as good as Samaras. Do you know some of his work?
Yeah, I'm familiar with his work, yeah.
It's called Photo Transformations. I have a signed copy of that book.
Really?
Yeah, I photographed him for my artist book in 1982 or 3 or 4, yeah. I loved his work. He's always an inspiration. He's a great artist.
You mentioned earlier that you're photographing currently during this time.
Right.
Tell me in terms of the accommodations you've sort of made in terms of your approach, because you said you like working close, but because of COVID and mask and social distancing, it makes it a little more of a challenge to do that effectively. So how are you working around that?
Well, I'm still using the 21 millimeter exclusively. Sometimes I use the 35. Now I'm being stubborn and using the 21. I'm interested in getting close, but yet at the same time getting an environment. I'm not doing just the face like the SX70. I want the person's environment, and I'm interested in my neighborhood where I've never photographed before. So we're shut down in April here in New York City. I'm sorry, March 15th or I think March 14th was the last time I went out. For 2 months, I didn't really go out much. I would go to the supermarket. There was a farmer's market, and I would take the 21 with me and one camera. And I like the masks on the faces. And so I did approach people, and maybe 4 feet instead of 2.5 feet or 3 feet. So I did stay away a little more, but I keyed into the mask, and I always go in talking to someone with a compliment, or I try to. I like your shirt. I like your tattoo. I like the light that's falling on you. I'd like to make a photograph. I would mention the mask and say, "Wow, I like your mask. Where'd you get that? I want to get one." Or you have a plastic face covering. I want to get one.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so start a conversation, and then, oh, I'd like to photograph it, and make that the thing. And it's not them; it's about the mask. And so I get them and the mask and where they're located. Hopefully, the light and the environment is of interest to me. Sometimes I don't speak to the person and just shoot and go up to them and shoot and then speak. And sometimes I'll shoot us candidly. I mean, I'll bring the camera up, but not really. Maybe a more of a group scene of people. It's definitely prevented me from going out into New York as I normally do. All the great events, the street events of New York City have been canceled since March. There's not the Macy Day Parade. The Thanksgiving Parade is canceled coming up. The Mermaid Parade was canceled. The Puerto Rican parade that I go to, the Israeli parade. Every weekend, there's 3 or 4 parades.
Yeah.
I don't shoot the parade in the spring. I'm not shooting the parade. I'm going early. I'm photographing the people, the crowds, the people around. I'm shooting the periphery. So that's all gone. That I haven't done that since the virus. I was fortunate enough on Saturday to be at Union Square Park, which is a meeting place for a lot of political rallies and stuff in New York City. I was there when they announced that Biden won the election, and the place erupted in joy, and the crowds just grew and grew, and I was in my element photographing. I just posted an image this morning from it on Instagram. I was in my element, finally for the first time, photographing a group of a mass group of people that I find I enjoy and get good work from. But generally, I've been slowed down. I've been home more. I've been working on 2 books, this book, and I have a new book coming out in 2022, my 3rd Coney Island book, so I've been working on that. It's all shot. I've gone to Coney Island during the virus 3 times. Usually I take a subway. I got a ride from a photo friend who I photographed with. We went together because I wouldn't take the subway. The subway's an hour and 15-minute ride. I didn't feel it was safe. So only recently have I started taking subways and buses to get outside of my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. I wanted to photograph at Coney Island during the pandemic to show what's going on in this year. This is the 50th year. The book is called Coney Island People, 50 Years. This is the 50th year I've been photographing in Coney Island, and the book will be 50 years of photographing in Coney Island. I wanted to get this year as the last year. Even though it was shut down, people were on the boardwalk. And again, I keyed into their masks. So to answer your question again, the way it's affected me mostly is it's kept me in my neighborhood. It's a nice neighborhood. I mean, it's nothing much going on. It's a residential area. But there's 2 parks. There's Central Park on the Upper West Side. My neighborhood is the Upper West Side. And Riverside Park, which I'm a block away from. So I've shot people in the park and on Broadway and on the side streets. And I'm getting images that I really like. So we'll see what happens with that. I might already have 40 images that I like.
You said that sometimes it can take you a while before you actually get your film processed. Absolutely. And you see and then see the images. How long does that usually take, and what advantage do you think it gives you as opposed to getting stuff immediately? Right.
So that's a very interesting question, because for the first time in my career, I'm developing the film right after I am shooting it and making prints right after I'm shooting. So since March, I've shot on the Upper West Side maybe 30 times. I have a numbering system that I could track that. And I've developed mostly all of the film, and I'm a little behind in printing, but I'm making prints I'm making contacts and then prints, and I'm seeing what I'm getting, much like I would do with a digital camera. This is the first time I've ever done that. Typically, I'm 4 years behind in developing my film. 3-4 years, hundreds and hundreds of rolls. I have film from 2018 I haven't developed. I'm now up to 2018, which isn't bad. I have the time now to develop, and I am not photographing in the quantity that I'm used to photographing. Mm-hmm. I'm not making trips to China, to Vietnam, to India, and piling up 70 rolls of film in 2 weeks, not being home and not developing. So if I make 3 or 4 large trips like that in a year, I'm accumulating a lot of film that I can't keep up with in the development. I do 4 rolls at a time, maybe every other day, every third day, every second day. And it's boring as hell. Now I have the time to catch up with my work. And secondly, I'm really excited about this new project because it's so historical, it's so current, it's so different. I really feel the weight of history. And I really feel that history will be looking at this for a long time. And I want to show this. This hasn't happened in over 100 years. Will it ever happen again? I hope not. This pandemic. And layered on that is Trump and the way he has transformed our society and added to our anxiety and the life that we're leaving. We're all anxious, and I want to pick up on that. I've done a few small demonstrations in my neighborhood, local demonstrations, Save the Post Office demonstration, an anti-Trump demonstration, maybe 100 people. It's very sweet, but neighborhoody. In the past, I liked having time intercede between when I shot and when I made prints, like 3 or 4 years later, because I could be more objective in a way. Right. My great hero doing this is a Winogrand who died, 1984 or 87? And he left 2,500 rolls of film undeveloped, 90,000 frames or so undeveloped, or if developed, not contact sheeted. And I always like that. So I could be more objective being 2 or 3 or 4 years separated from when I photographed it. Did I like that? No. Did I do it consciously? No, I didn't plan on doing it. I just couldn't keep up with it. And I developed my own film to this day. I have my own darkroom. I don't want anyone to make my prints, and I don't want anyone certainly to develop my film because they're not going to do it the way I do it. Not that I do it perfectly, but I have a consistent way of doing it. So, and it seems to work out all right. So it's a good question because indeed, this is the first time I have really kept up with any black and white project. My book on Mexico, which we talked about 2 years ago, I shot it from 1993 to 2010. The book came out in 2018. Why so long? Because I didn't have the work. I didn't have it all developed until probably 2013 or 14, and then finding a publisher and all that. I met Andrew in 2018. It took us 2 years to get this book together, the SX70 book. And you'll note he designed the book. The front cover and the back cover photographs are hand tipped in.
I noticed that.
Hand. The proportions of the book are in relationship or in a ratio of the size of the actual Polaroid. The colors on the front photograph, the cover photograph, are of the man's shirt in the photograph are the colors of Mardi Gras, and he uses those colors on the back cover with the stripes on the back cover. He's very fastidious. He's a terrific designer, and I let him have sway. We sequence the photographs together. I mean, the process of making this book for me was fascinating, and I was very involved in it. And we did it via Zoom, but elbow to elbow, really.
Yeah. What's one of the things I like about the book is the attention to those slight details. It really makes it a lovely,
that no one else cares about. All the dimensions, all the sizes, no one would notice. Not many people would notice, but to him, it was really important. And I appreciate it. It didn't speed things up any. We had some issues with the printer, to get the gold leaf right and to layer it, lay it on. I think some of that was done by hand on the cover and the back cover. And it's a small book, and I'm saying, is this worth $40 even? It's 88 pages. It's small. I think I'm liking it more and more. I mean, it's so different. I'm having trouble coming to terms with it in a way, but I'm growing to really appreciate all that's in the book. So,
Well, my last question that I ask each guest is, I ask them to recommend another photographer for our listeners to discover and explore on their own. It can be anybody.
Okay.
Someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that be and why?
I have someone that you definitely should interview if you haven't already. I'm surprised I haven't told you about her. Her name is Margarita Mavromichalis. It's a mouthful, Margarita. Mm-hmm. She's a very fascinating person, fascinating photographer. She is from Greece. She's never lived in one place more than 4 years, from birth to now. She's moved every 4 years. She's photographed from 1911 till now. She's won almost every prize in Europe. She just moved from London back to Athens. She lives in Greece. And I think you should interview her. She's the best photographer I know. I mean, she's incredible. She's in isolation. She's been quarantined in London, self-quarantined, and now just moved. And she created a quarantine body of work, self-portraiture body of work.
Oh, really? Okay.
Quarantine. But she's a great street photographer, fearless. She did a great series on Lesbos and the immigrants that came over by boat in Lesbos. She's been interviewed some, but she's kind of shy. She knows 5 languages. She's amazing person. And we've partnered in a lot of workshops to India, to Vietnam, to where else have we gone? Oh God, I'm drawing blanks. Oh, to Cambodia, Laos. So she's someone that should be on everyone's radar. Her Instagram feed is TITA_Mavro, and her last name is Mavromichalis, Mavromichalis. Her family liberated Greece in 1820 from the Turks. I think her great uncle, grandfather was one of the first premiers of Greece, and she's so nice. I mean,
wow, she sounds fascinating.
Person. So I'm going to have her email you if I may. Is that
That'd
possible?
be great. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And Harvey, thank you again, and congratulations on the new book.
Thank you, and thank you. It's always wonderful to talk to you.
Thanks to Harvey for joining us. Find out more about Harvey and his work by visiting harveysteinphoto.com. And this year, I'll be involved with Photo NOLA, which is an annual celebration of photography in New Orleans, produced by the New Orleans Photo Alliance in partnership with museums, galleries, and alternative venues citywide. The 15th annual Photo NOLA Festival is going to look a little different this year, with a hybrid of online and physical elements. It will take place from December 9th through 12th, with a broad range of photography exhibitions on display both virtually and socially distanced throughout the winter season. The lineup includes virtual portfolio reviews, workshops, lectures, and more. Many events are free and open to the public, and I'll be conducting an online workshop myself, and you can find out more about it by visiting photonola.org or check out the link in the show notes. If you're a devoted listener and subscribe to the show, write us a review on whatever service you listen to podcasts. Those reviews allow us to grow. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and our mailing list. On the YouTube channel, I offer critiques on images submitted by TCF listeners like you, while the mailing list keeps you updated with all TCF events, including workshops and more. Sign up today. And remember, you can support the show by contributing to our Patreon effort or make a one-time or recurring donation via PayPal. Thanks to Christy Hyam, Larry Gason, Dirk Benkert, Jane Duckett, Jeff Larison, Ruth Steinberg, Judy Rook, and Diane Werr for their recent contributions. We also provide a series of ebooks on photography available for purchase on our website. It's my way of sharing my experience and knowledge, and another way for you to support the show. And if you find you can't find every episode of the show, download the Candid Frame app, which is available for both Apple iOS and Android. And because of your generosity, it's free to download and use. No additional purchases are required. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker. And our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at incompetech.com. And this is Ibarionex, and this is The Candid Frame.